The day started like any other at the downtown office of a large retail company. The air smelled faintly of coffee and freshly printed paper. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, and employees hurried through the hallways trying to look busy before their manager walked in. Everyone knew that when she entered, silence followed. Her name was Laura, and she was the kind of manager who believed in order, discipline, and respect. She had worked her way up from a sales associate to regional manager, and she made sure people knew it. Laura wasn't a bad person. She was just serious. She didn't like excuses or laziness. She had built her success through hard work, and she expected the same from everyone around her. But sometimes her strict way of dealing with people made her seem cold and unapproachable. Her employees respected her, but many feared her too. That morning, she arrived earlier than usual because the company was hosting a meeting with several high-level guests. The headquarters had arranged for some new investors and top executives to visit and review how each branch was performing. Laura saw it as her chance to show everyone how capable she was. She wanted her branch to stand out, and she wanted her name mentioned. In the next promotion list, she spent hours, making sure everything looked perfect. From the alignment of chairs in the conference room to the placement of the company logo on the slides she had prepared. Everything must be flawless, she told her assistant, straightening a pile of reports. If something goes wrong, it reflects on me. When the guests finally arrived, the office turned tense. Everyone stood a little straighter, spoke a little softer, and moved a little faster. Laura greeted them with her confident smile, shaking hands firmly, making sure to leave a strong impression. Among the group, there was one man who looked different. He wasn't dressed in a sharp suit like the others. He wore a simple button-up shirt and jeans, his sleeves rolled up as if he had come from a casual errand instead of an executive meeting. Laura noticed him right away and frowned slightly. He didn't have a name tag or a briefcase, and he seemed to be observing the office quietly rather than joining the conversation. She whispered to her assistant, "Who's that man? He doesn't look like part of the investor team." Her assistant shrugged. "I'm not sure. Maybe someone from maintenance or one of the suppliers?" Laura nodded slowly but kept her eyes on him. As the group moved through the office, she noticed the man stop to talk briefly with some employees. They spoke to him casually, even smiling, which annoyed her. "We're in the middle of an important visit, and people are laughing with some random guy," she muttered under her breath. When the group entered the break area, Laura caught the man leaning against the counter, observing quietly while sipping coffee. It was the kind of relaxed posture that she would normally scold an employee for during work hours. Feeling irritated, she walked up to him. "Excuse me," she said firmly. "This area is for staff only. Visitors are supposed to wait in the main hall unless invited." The man looked at her calmly, his expression friendly.
"Oh, I was just getting a coffee."
"I hope that's all right," he said in a polite, easy tone. Laura crossed her arms. "Not really. During work hours, we have rules about who can be in certain areas. This is a professional environment. Some people forget that." He smiled faintly as if amused and replied, "That's understandable. Every good office needs structure." His tone wasn't defensive, it was almost approving, but that didn't make Laura any less annoyed. She gave a tight nod and turned away. "Exactly. And that's why I make sure everyone remembers who's in charge." When she left the room, a few employees exchanged uneasy looks. One of them whispered, "Does she know who that is?" Another shook their head. "No idea. But she's going to find out soon." Laura didn't hear them. She was already focused on preparing her presentation for the afternoon meeting. She wanted to impress the visitors, especially the senior executives who had come from headquarters. Her slideshow was filled with graphs, statistics, and performance reports. She rehearsed her talking points several times in front of her assistant, adjusting her tone to sound confident but not arrogant. Around noon, the guests gathered in the conference room. Laura stood at the front, remote in hand, ready to begin. To her surprise, the same casually dressed man walked in and took a seat near the corner of the room. He had no notepad, no laptop, and seemed more interested in watching her than in the slides. She didn't hide her irritation. To her, it looked like he was wasting time, maybe even distracting others. She decided to make a point. "As we can see," she said, clicking to the next slide, "our success depends on discipline and professionalism at every level. That's what sets this branch apart from others. We don't tolerate a laid-back attitude." She glanced toward the man as she said it. Several people noticed. He simply smiled again, unfazed, and nodded slightly as if agreeing with her point. The rest of the presentation went smoothly, though Laura couldn't shake the feeling that he was silently judging her. After the meeting, one of the junior employees approached her carefully. "Ma'am, I just wanted to mention—" "The man in the corner, I think he's—" Laura waved her hand dismissively. "Don't worry about him. Probably an assistant from logistics or something. People from that department never dress properly." The junior employee bit his lip and stayed quiet. Laura walked away confidently, feeling proud of her performance. She thought she had impressed everyone. Later that afternoon, the guests toured the warehouse. Laura led the group, explaining the workflow and how efficiently her team handled deliveries. The same man followed behind, sometimes stopping to talk with workers. He asked them about their schedules, the management style, and how they felt about their jobs. Most answered carefully, unsure how honest they could be. When he asked one of them, "What's your manager like?" The employee hesitated. "She's very focused," he said cautiously. "Wants everything perfect. Sometimes a little too strict, maybe." The man nodded thoughtfully but said nothing more. As the tour ended, Laura approached him again. "I hope the visit has been useful," she said, her tone polite but firm. "If you need anything, I can arrange it." He smiled slightly. "You've done a fine job running things here. You seem very passionate about your work." "Of course," she said proudly. "That's how I've made this branch one of the top performing in the region. Some people take their jobs lightly, but I believe in setting high standards." "That's good to hear," he replied calmly. "High standards keep a business strong." He looked like he wanted to say something else but didn't. Instead, he thanked her and walked away, leaving Laura feeling oddly unsettled. There was something about him, his confidence, the way he spoke, that didn't quite fit with her assumption of him being a minor staff member. But she brushed off the thought. "He's probably just trying to sound important," she told herself. As the day came to an end, Laura sat in her office, reviewing the meeting notes. She felt proud of how she handled everything, the presentation, the tour, even the little incident in the break room. "That man needed to learn that rules are rules," she murmured, smiling to herself. But downstairs, whispers were already spreading. A few employees who knew who the man really was were talking quietly among themselves. One said, "She really has no idea, does she?" Another replied, "Nope. She just lectured the owner about professionalism." By the time Laura left the office that evening, she was still unaware of the storm she had just set in motion. To her, it was just another successful day, a day where she had shown control, confidence, and leadership. She didn't realize that her words to that quiet man would soon become the most unforgettable mistake of her career. That night, as she locked her car and looked back at the glowing office windows, she felt satisfied. Tomorrow, she thought, they'll probably talk about how well I handled the meeting. She couldn't have been more wrong. The man she had scolded was not a visitor, not a supplier, and definitely not a minor employee. He was the one person whose opinion mattered more than anyone else's. And tomorrow morning, she would find out exactly who he was and how deeply her words had reached. The next morning, the office had its usual buzz, but something felt different. The employees whispered more than they worked, and when Laura walked in, everyone suddenly fell silent. She noticed the tension right away. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she made her way to her office, pretending not to notice the strange looks. She had no idea what people were whispering about, but she assumed it was about her performance the day before. She smiled slightly, thinking they were probably impressed by how confident she had been during the meeting. In her office, she sat down with a satisfied sigh. She opened her laptop and checked her email, expecting a message of praise from the headquarters. Instead, she found an unexpected invitation. Mandatory follow-up meeting, 3 p.m. sharp. Attendance required for all branch managers. It didn't mention what the meeting was about or who would be leading it. She frowned but didn't think too much of it. Maybe it was a normal debrief after the investor's visit. Before she could start her daily reports, her assistant came in holding a stack of papers and looking nervous. "Morning," Laura said without looking up. "Let's get through the pending files quickly." Her assistant hesitated. "Ma'am, about the man from yesterday." Laura looked up, slightly annoyed. "Yes, what about him?" I just thought you should know that some people said he's not who you think he is. Laura raised an eyebrow. And who do they think he is? A spy from another branch? She laughed softly at her own joke, but her assistant didn't smile. That made her pause. You're serious? I don't know for sure, her assistant said quietly. But I heard one of the senior accountants say that he's from the top management. Maybe even from the main office. Laura leaned back in her chair, her expression hard to read. If he was from the main office, don't you think I would have known? Headquarters always informs me before sending anyone for inspection. Her assistant shrugged. Maybe this time they wanted to see how things really are. Laura didn't like that answer. She hated surprises, especially ones that made her feel out of control. Fine, she said curtly. Even if he was from the top, I have nothing to hide. Everything here is in perfect order. The assistant nodded and left, but Laura could feel a small uneasiness creeping into her chest. She tried to shake it off and buried herself in work. Still, every few minutes she caught herself thinking about that man. His calm voice, his polite smile, the way he didn't seem bothered by her tone. Most people got nervous around her, but he didn't. It was as if he was the one quietly observing her instead of the other way around. Later that morning, she walked through the office to check on her team. She noticed people were unusually quiet when she passed by. A few of them stopped talking mid-sentence. Normally, she liked when people stayed focused. But today, it didn't feel like respect. It felt like something else. Something she couldn't quite name. She stopped near the marketing desk where two employees were whispering. Is there something you'd like to share? She asked, her tone sharp. Both looked startled. No, ma'am. Just finalizing the campaign report, one said quickly. Laura stared at them for a moment before walking away. As she headed back to her office, she heard one of them whisper softly, "She really doesn't know yet." The words stung more than she expected. What didn't she know? By lunchtime, the tension had grown heavier. She went to the cafeteria, where she usually took her coffee break alone. Today, though, she noticed a few employees sitting around the same table talking in low voices. When she entered, they immediately stopped. She felt their eyes on her as she poured herself a cup of coffee. She tried to ignore it, but the unease kept growing. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with a message from headquarters. It was short. The owner will be attending the 3 p.m. meeting personally. Laura froze. The owner? He rarely visited any branches. She had worked there for years and had never met him in person. There were stories about how humble and quiet he was, how he liked to visit places unannounced to see the real picture of his company. The thought made her throat dry. Slowly, her mind went back to yesterday, to the man in jeans, the one she had scolded for being unprofessional. Her heart began to pound. No, it can't be, she whispered to herself. But the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. The way he moved around the office, the questions he asked, the way others looked at him. And the smile. That knowing, calm smile that now seemed less like amusement and more like quiet understanding. For the rest of the afternoon, she couldn't focus. Every email, every phone call, every sound felt distant. Her thoughts kept returning to the possibility that she had insulted the very person who owned the company. She remembered the exact words she had used. Some people forget this is a professional environment. She had said that to the man who probably built the company from the ground up. The embarrassment burned in her chest. As the clock moved closer to 3 p.m., her confidence started to fade. She adjusted her blazer several times, trying to calm herself down. Maybe it's not him, she kept repeating. Maybe it's just another executive. I'm overthinking. But deep down she knew. Her gut told her she was right. When she entered the conference room, most of the managers were already seated. The air felt heavy, as if everyone was waiting for something big to happen. She tried to keep her usual confident posture even though her palms were sweating. The door opened. Conversation stopped instantly. In walked the same man she had seen yesterday, wearing a simple navy blue jacket this time, still with that calm expression. Behind him was the regional director, who introduced him in a proud tone. Everyone, please welcome Mr. Bennett, the founder and owner of the company. Laura felt the blood drain from her face. Her heart thudded loudly in her ears. It was him. The man she had lectured, the man she thought was some careless visitor, was standing just a few feet away, now sitting at the head of the table, his rightful place. She could barely breathe. For a moment, she hoped he wouldn't recognize her. Maybe he had met so many people that she was just a blur in his memory. But that hope vanished when he glanced her way and gave a polite nod, the same calm smile on his lips. He remembered. The meeting began. Mr. Bennett spoke in a soft, steady voice that demanded attention without raising in volume. He talked about the company's growth, about challenges ahead, about the importance of leadership rooted in respect, not fear. Every word seemed to carry weight, and when he said, "True leaders earn loyalty by listening, not by commanding," Laura felt as if those words were meant directly for her. Throughout the meeting, she couldn't look up. She kept her eyes on the table, her hands clenched together under her folder. Each minute felt longer than the last. When Mr. Bennett mentioned how he had visited the branch the previous day, without announcing himself, she could almost hear her pulse echo in her ears. He continued, "Sometimes it's the quiet observations that tell the real story of a workplace. You see how people treat others when they think no one important is watching." The room stayed silent. Laura's stomach twisted. She wanted to disappear. When the meeting finally ended, Mr. Bennett stood up and spoke kindly. "I'll be meeting a few managers individually over the next days. I like to understand the people who run my company." His eyes flicked briefly toward her before he left the room. As soon as the door closed, several managers turned to look at her. No one said a word, but the expression on their faces said everything. They knew she knew. Everyone knew. After the meeting, Laura went back to her office and shut the door. She stood by the window, staring at the street below. The confident woman who had walked in that morning now felt small and fragile. She thought about all the times she had been strict, the times she'd snapped at employees for small mistakes, the moments she had mistaken fear for respect. Her assistant knocked softly. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Laura didn't turn around. "I'm fine," she said quietly, but her voice trembled. When her assistant left, she sat down slowly, pressing her hands against her face. She could still see his expression. Calm, kind, but knowing. It wasn't anger she had seen in his eyes. It was disappointment, maybe even understanding. Somehow that felt worse. The day dragged on. People passed by her office door, whispering quietly. Some felt bad for her. Others didn't. By the time the office emptied out, she was still sitting there, staring at her reflection in the dark computer screen. For the first time in years, she questioned the kind of leader she had become. All her pride, all her control suddenly felt meaningless. She had spent so long trying to look powerful that she had forgotten how to be kind. That night, she left the office later than everyone else. As she walked through the quiet hallway, the sound of her own footsteps echoed. In that silence, one truth hit her hard. The man she had judged so quickly had seen her at her worst, and tomorrow, she would have to face him again. The next morning came too soon. Laura barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mr. Bennett's calm face and heard his words echoing in her mind. True leaders earn loyalty by listening. She kept thinking about how confident she had been when she talked down to him, and how foolish that must have looked. She arrived at the office earlier than usual, hoping to gather herself before anyone else showed up. The building was quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. She stood by the large window in her office, watching the city slowly come alive below. Normally, that view made her feel powerful. Today, it only reminded her how small she really was. She made herself a cup of coffee but could hardly drink it. Her stomach was tight, her hands slightly trembling. The air felt heavier than usual, almost like the office itself knew what had happened. By 9 a.m., her staff started arriving. She heard their footsteps, their whispers, their hushed laughter that stopped the moment she stepped out of her office. She could tell they were trying to act normal, but everyone knew. She didn't need to hear the words. Their silence said it all. Her assistant entered with a hesitant knock. "Good morning," he said softly, placing a few documents on her desk. "Good morning," Laura replied, trying to sound steady. "Any updates from headquarters?" He paused. "Just that Mr. Bennett will be at the branch again today. He's meeting with some department heads." Her hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. "Today?" she asked. "Yes," the assistant said carefully. "The schedule says he's here until the afternoon." Laura's heart dropped. She thought she might have more time before facing him again. "Did it mention if I'm supposed to meet him?" "Not yet," he said. But I think he plans to talk to all the regional managers by the end of the week. Laura nodded slowly. All right. Let me know the moment he asks for me. After her assistant left, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes for a moment. Her mind raced. Should she apologize when she saw him? Should she explain herself? Or would that just make things worse? She didn't know what to expect from him. He hadn't looked angry in the meeting, but his silence had been worse than any scolding. A few hours passed in slow motion. She tried to keep herself busy, reviewing reports and replying to emails, but she couldn't focus. Every sound made her jump. A knock on the door, a phone ringing, even footsteps in the hallway. Each time she feared it would be him. Around noon, the office buzzed with quiet excitement. People whispered that the owner was walking through the departments, talking to employees, asking questions again. Some even said he'd stopped by the break room, the same place where she had embarrassed herself the day before. She imagined him standing there, remembering how she'd spoken to him like a child who broke a rule. Her cheeks burned just thinking about it. She stepped out of her office to get some air. The employees straightened as she passed, pretending to be busy. Normally, she liked that. Today, it just made her feel isolated. When she walked past the accounting section, she saw Mr. Bennett standing beside one of the desks, talking to a young employee. He looked completely at ease, sleeves rolled up again, smile gentle, posture relaxed. Everyone around him seemed comfortable too, which surprised her. He didn't carry himself like a man who expected people to fear him. He listened carefully, nodded often, and even laughed quietly once or twice. For a moment, she simply watched him. There was something almost disarming about the way he blended in, how he made people forget he was the owner. Then he turned his head slightly and their eyes met. She froze. He smiled, not mockingly, not sarcastically, just a polite, calm smile, and gave a small nod before turning back to his conversation. Her chest tightened. That brief look was enough to make her heart race. She turned and quickly walked back to her office, closing the door behind her. She sank into her chair, staring at her reflection on the dark computer screen. "What have I done?" she whispered. For years she had worked to build her reputation, and now it felt like one careless moment had shattered it. A soft knock broke her thoughts. Her assistant peeked in again. "Ma'am, Mr. Bennett asked if you're available for a short talk after lunch." Her heart skipped. He asked for me," she said quietly. "Yes, around 2. She nodded slowly. "Thank you." When the door closed again, she sat motionless. It was happening sooner than she thought. The next hour passed painfully slow. She could barely eat. Her mind replayed every detail of their first encounter. Her words, his quiet expression, the way she had walked away thinking she was in control. The more she thought about it, the worse it felt. At exactly 2, her assistant came in. "He's ready to see you now." "He's in the meeting room." She took a deep breath and stood. "All right," she said softly, straightening her jacket. She looked composed on the outside, but inside her thoughts were chaos. As she walked down the hallway, her legs felt heavy. Every step echoed loudly in her ears. When she entered the meeting room, Mr. Bennett was standing by the window, looking out at the street below. Sunlight spilled across the floor. He turned when he heard the door close. "Laura," he said gently, "please have a seat." His tone wasn't harsh. It wasn't even distant. That somehow made it harder. She sat carefully across from him, her hands clasped in her lap. He took a moment before speaking. "I visited your branch because I wanted to understand the work culture firsthand," he said. "And I must say, you've built a strong operation here. Everything runs efficiently." She blinked, surprised. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. He smiled slightly. "But I also noticed something else. There's fear here. Not respect, fear. When I talk to your team, they speak highly of your dedication, but they also seem afraid to make mistakes." Laura swallowed hard. "I didn't realize it came across that way," she admitted. "I think your intentions are good," he continued. "You want things to be perfect. You've worked hard to reach where you are, and that's something I respect. But sometimes in trying to be perfect, we forget that people make a place what it is. They're not machines." She nodded slowly, her throat tight. "You're right," she said softly. "I guess I let the pressure get to me." He smiled kindly. "It happens to all of us. But leadership isn't about control. It's about trust. I saw how you spoke to me that day, and I don't hold it against you. You didn't know who I was, but it showed me how you treat people when you think they have no power over you. That's what truly defines a leader. Those words hit her harder than any punishment could. She felt her chest tighten, her eyes stinging, but she blinked the feeling away. "I'm truly sorry," she said. "I spoke out of line. I was trying to keep order, but I see now that I was wrong." Mr. Bennett nodded. "Apologies matter, but change matters more. I believe you can be an excellent leader. One people respect not because they fear you, but because they feel valued." For the first time in years, she felt speechless. She had expected anger, maybe even dismissal, but instead she found understanding. He didn't belittle her, didn't humiliate her in front of others. He simply offered her a mirror, one that reflected both her strength and her flaws. When the meeting ended, he stood and extended his hand. "I'll be checking in again in a few weeks," he said kindly. "Let's see how the energy here changes." She stood as well and shook his hand, her grip a little unsteady. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. "I won't forget this." After he left, she stayed in the room for a while, staring at the empty chair across from her. Her chest still felt heavy, but there was also something new, a strange sense of clarity. When she returned to her office, her assistant looked at her curiously. "How did it go?" Laura took a deep breath and smiled faintly. "Better than I expected," she said. "But I have a lot to think about." That evening, after everyone left, she walked through the quiet office again. She stopped by each department, remembering moments when she had been too harsh or too distant. She realized how much she had demanded from her team without really listening to them. As she looked around, she noticed the little things she had ignored before. A motivational quote taped near the marketing desk, a group photo of the staff celebrating a milestone, a thank you note pinned to the notice board. For the first time, she saw these not as decorations but as signs of the people who made her branch run. When she finally stepped outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She stood there for a moment, breathing deeply. The embarrassment she had felt the day before hadn't vanished, but now it carried a different weight, a lesson she would never forget. She realized that maybe Mr. Bennett hadn't come to judge her. Maybe he had come to remind her of something she had lost along the way, the humanity behind leadership. Laura's chest tightened as Mr. Bennett spoke those words. They weren't said with anger, but with quiet observation, which somehow made them hit harder. She felt her throat go dry, her pulse quickening in her wrist. For the first time, she realized that he had seen everything, not just her words, but her leadership, her habits, her tone. The image she had built so carefully over the years was no longer under her control. "I understand, sir," she said softly. "Maybe I've been too strict sometimes." Mr. Bennett studied her face for a moment before replying. "You remind me of myself years ago. I also thought the only way to keep a team strong was by being firm all the time. But eventually I learned that people work better when they feel trusted, not watched." She lowered her eyes, unable to meet his. "I didn't mean to make anyone afraid." He nodded slowly. "I believe you didn't. You've worked hard and your numbers show it. But numbers aren't everything. A strong company isn't built only by targets and deadlines, it's built by people who want to come to work every morning." The words sank deep. She could almost hear her staff's quiet footsteps, their careful tones, the nervousness in their laughter. She had always taken their caution as a sign of respect. Now it felt like evidence of something much heavier. He leaned back slightly, crossing his arms. "What happened yesterday, let's not focus on that. Everyone makes mistakes. I just want you to think about what kind of leader you want to be." Laura looked up finally, meeting his steady gaze. "I will, sir," she said sincerely. "And I'm sorry for how I spoke to you that day. I didn't know who you were, but even if I had, that wasn't right." He gave a faint smile. "Apology accepted. I'm not here to humiliate anyone. In fact, I came here to understand how to support managers better. You've done impressive work despite the pressure. You just need to balance authority with empathy." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Sunlight stretched across the table, casting soft lines between them. The tension that had filled the room began to ease. After a while, he stood up. "Take a walk with me," he said. Laura hesitated, but then followed him out of the meeting room. They walked quietly through the hallways. The employees noticed them but pretended not to look. She could feel eyes following, whispers starting and dying down. Mr. Bennett stopped near the open office floor. "Do you see them?" he asked softly. "Every person here contributes to something bigger. When they're proud of their work, everything runs smoother. When they're afraid, they do the bare minimum." She nodded, the weight of his words settling in her chest. I used to think that being strict kept them focused, she admitted. He smiled gently. It might work for a while. But after some time, people stop trying to impress you. They just try not to disappoint you. There's a difference. She looked at him, realizing he wasn't just giving her advice. He was teaching her something about herself. They continued walking until they reached the break room. It was the same place where the whole misunderstanding had started. The same coffee machine, the same corner table. Only this time the atmosphere was calm. Mr. Bennett picked up a cup and poured coffee, then gestured for her to take one too. You know, he said with a faint smile, when I walked in here that day, I wasn't testing anyone. I just wanted to see how the staff interacted. You were passionate, confident, maybe too confident. She gave a quiet laugh, though it came out more like a sigh. I thought you were someone new who needed direction. I didn't mean to come across as rude. I know, he said, and I didn't take it personally. But it showed me something interesting, how the culture of this branch reflects its leader. She leaned against the counter, her eyes downcast. I've been leading like that for years. Maybe I was afraid to lose control. That's a common fear, he said, but control doesn't come from fear. It comes from respect, and respect grows when people feel heard. For the first time in years, Laura didn't have an answer ready. She had always believed she understood leadership better than anyone else in the building. But standing there beside him, she realized how much she still had to learn. As they talked, one of the younger employees entered, freezing for a moment when she saw the owner. Mr. Bennett smiled warmly. Good afternoon, he said, his tone friendly. The woman smiled back shyly. Good afternoon, sir. Laura watched how at ease the employee suddenly became, something that never happened around her. It was like Mr. Bennett's calmness dissolved the tension that usually filled the air. When the employee left, Laura turned to him. I see what you mean, she said quietly. People act differently around you, he chuckled. Maybe because I don't carry my title into every room. You shouldn't either. Let them see the person behind the position. That sentence lingered in her mind long after he said it. They walked back to her office together, and before leaving, he paused by the door. You've got potential, Laura, he said. Don't let one mistake define you. Let it teach you. Thank you, she said sincerely. I'll do better. Not just for the company, but for my team. He nodded once, his expression kind. That's what I like to hear. When he left, the silence in her office felt different, lighter somehow. She sat down at her desk, staring at the reports she had been so focused on earlier. For the first time, they didn't seem so important. Instead, she opened her notebook and began writing small reminders to herself. Listen more. Encourage ideas. Appreciate effort. As she wrote, her assistant stepped in carefully. Everything all right, ma'am? Laura looked up with a calm smile. Everything's fine. Actually, I think things are going to get better around here. Her assistant smiled, looking a little surprised. That's good to hear. After he left, Laura looked out the window again. The city still moved below her, but this time it didn't make her feel small. It reminded her that everyone, no matter how high their position, was still part of something larger. That evening, when most of the staff had gone home, Laura stayed back. She walked through each department, stopping by desks, noticing the details she'd ignored before, the family photos, the small plants, the effort people put into their workspace. She realized how disconnected she had become from the very people who kept her branch running. She made a silent promise to change that. When she finally left the building, the night air felt cool against her skin. She took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. The shame she had felt the past 2 days was still there, but it had softened, turning into something new. Determination. She knew it would take time to rebuild trust, but she was ready to start. And somewhere deep down, she was grateful to the man she had once insulted without knowing. He hadn't just forgiven her, he had shown her the kind of leader she could become. The following Monday, the atmosphere in the office was different. It wasn't loud or tense, it was quiet in a thoughtful way. People greeted one another a bit more openly, and there was a faint energy in the air like something had shifted. Laura walked in earlier than usual again, but this time her steps were lighter. Over the weekend, she had done a lot of thinking. She'd replayed everything Mr. Bennett said and realized that leadership wasn't about holding power. It was about inspiring trust. It wasn't easy to accept, but deep down she knew he was right. She placed her bag on the desk, took a deep breath, and looked around her office. The view hadn't changed, but how she saw it had. It didn't feel like a throne anymore. It felt like a responsibility. Around 9, her assistant came in with a small smile. "Morning, ma'am. The weekly report's on your desk. Oh, and Mr. Bennett called. He's visiting again later this week just to see how things are going." Laura smiled faintly. "Thank you." "That's fine." Her assistant hesitated, then added, "The staff seem different. They're talking more today." She smiled again. "That's good. Let's keep it that way." After he left, Laura stood and walked through the office. She didn't say anything at first, just observed. People looked up, clearly surprised to see her out there without a specific reason. Instead of walking straight past them, she stopped at a few desks. "How's the new client report going?" she asked one analyst. He blinked, unsure how to respond. It's good, ma'am. Almost done." "Good," she said, smiling lightly. "Let me know if you need any help." He looked stunned, as if those words had never come from her before. At another desk, she paused to compliment a design draft one of the team members was working on. The young woman smiled so broadly that it nearly broke the awkwardness that usually hung in the air. By noon, people were already whispering about how different she seemed. When lunch came, instead of eating in her office, Laura walked into the break room with her tray. Conversations stopped instantly. Everyone froze, unsure what to do. She gave a calm smile. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked, gesturing to an empty chair. A few exchanged nervous glances before someone said, "Of course not, ma'am." Laura sat down. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, as she began asking casual questions, how long they'd worked there, what projects they enjoyed most, the room slowly thawed. Laughter returned in small bursts, cautious at first, but genuine. For the first time in years, she felt like part of the team rather than above it. That afternoon, as she sat back at her desk, she realized something important. Change wasn't about grand speeches or sudden apologies. It was about consistent actions day after day. Throughout the week, she kept at it. She checked in on projects not just to evaluate progress, but to understand people's challenges. She listened when someone had an idea. When a mistake happened, she discussed it privately instead of calling attention to it. Gradually, she noticed the office energy begin to lift. People smiled more. Meetings felt less like drills and more like collaboration. A few days later, Mr. Bennett returned. The staff no longer acted terrified when he walked through the door. They greeted him warmly, even joked lightly. He noticed the change right away. When he reached Laura's office, she was speaking to 2 team members about a project timeline. Her tone was patient, her body language relaxed. When she saw him, she smiled, excused herself, and stood up. "Mr. Bennett," she greeted. "Welcome back," he smiled. "Thank you. I can already feel a difference in the room." "I've been working on that," she said sincerely. "I can tell," he replied, glancing toward the glass walls where the staff were moving confidently through their tasks. "You've created an entirely new energy here." Laura folded her hands, a bit shy. "It wasn't easy at first. I realized I had built habits over the years that made people shut down. But once I started actually listening, things began to change." He nodded approvingly. "That's how leadership works. It's never about titles or authority. It's about connection. And you found that balance." They talked for a while, about future plans for the branch, ways to strengthen the work culture, and upcoming promotions. Mr. Bennett's tone was encouraging, not superior. He treated her like an equal, someone who had learned and grown. Before leaving, he said something that stayed with her long after he was gone. "You turned a mistake into progress. Most people spend their lives avoiding failure, but the best leaders use it as a turning point. I'm proud of that," she smiled, her chest warm with gratitude. "Thank you, sir, that means a lot." After he left, the staff gathered in small groups, talking about how different the workplace felt lately. Her assistant stopped by her door later that evening and said, "Ma'am, the team's been saying how much they appreciate the changes. They notice you really listen now." Laura smiled softly. "That's good. That's how it should be." He hesitated, then added with a grin, "You know, I think they were more scared of you than you realized." She laughed quietly. "I know, but not anymore." That night, when the office emptied, Laura sat at her desk again, looking out at the city lights. It was the same view she had stared at so many times before, but now it meant something else. It didn't make her feel small or powerful. It made her feel part of something living, something that needed care. She thought back to the first time she met Mr. Bennett, how she had spoken to him without knowing who he was, full of arrogance and impatience. The memory still made her cringe a little, but now it also made her smile. If that embarrassing moment hadn't happened, she might never have learned what leadership truly meant. In the weeks that followed, the change only deepened. Her team became more open, more creative. Productivity actually improved, but more importantly, people seemed happier. They shared ideas freely, supported one another, and treated the office like a shared space, not a battlefield. One afternoon, during a team meeting, one of the employees raised their hand and said, "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, things feel really different now, better. It's easier to talk, and it feels like you actually hear us." The room went silent, waiting for her response. Laura smiled gently and said, "That's because I finally learned that leading isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about making sure everyone else feels heard." There was a small round of applause, light laughter, and a few nods around the table. It wasn't a dramatic moment, just a real one. When the meeting ended, Laura looked around at her team. She realized she didn't just lead them now. She respected them. And they respected her back, not because they feared her, but because they trusted her. That night, as she walked out of the building, she thought again of Mr. Bennett's calm smile. What had once been humiliation had turned into the greatest lesson of her career. She had insulted her boss without knowing, but in the end, that mistake became the reason she discovered what true leadership meant. Not control, but connection. And from that day forward, she led not from her office chair, but from her heart.